Hi folks, in this video we're going to be making a 1/6 scale Snowtrooper from Star Wars Empire Strikes Back. Now as you can see I have him all nicely printed out, I've cleaned him up and I've also primed him. He's held together with an elastic band at the moment because the arms, head, backpack and body and gun are all separate. So what I'll do is I will just quickly break down the pieces and show you how I got him into the state he is right now. So here he is broken down in all his component parts. So I chose to print the bottom half of the section all in one piece and that came out really well. I did the head, body, arms and gun separate. You can print the upper part all in one piece as well, but I just figured the gun in particular had a lot of small details that would be a bit tricky, I think, to do all in one piece. You're not sure how exactly it's going to print out. Also, it'll make it a little bit easier to break those parts down for painting. As is the backpack, that is also separate as well. And of course, finally, the base. So what I have done so far is essentially just primered them using white paint. So I used the Citadel White Scar. If you don't happen to have any of that, or you don't have a Games Workshop near you, Halfords do a pretty good white primer. It's actually a little bit cheaper than the Citadel one, and to be honest, it's just as good a white. It's that nice bold sort of titanium white. Finally, I then coated the entire piece with satin varnish. So the idea with that is obviously that it gives it that reflective look to make it look a lot more like armour. So I concentrated that primarily just on the armour pieces, because I'm going to come in and paint in all the rest of the costume, the fabric parts, and that'll obviously be matte. I did the same thing with the gun, so again that is sprayed with the varnish. I just made sure to cover off the two parts of the armour that are white, and I covered that with blue tack and then sprayed it white, then sprayed it black. And with the base, again that has just been completely sprayed black. I printed that hollow and I covered over the holes at the bottom with a couple of pads to keep it nice and secure. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it. As I say, this is in 1/6 scale. It's of course by Star Wars 3D, and let's get cracking. So the first part of the model I'm going to tackle is the largest part, which is all the clothing, all the fabric, or the undersuit, the trousers, the skirt, all that type of stuff. Now, looking at reference material online, trying to look at sort of stills from the movie, I think it's a very light ivory colour. So to make up this colour, what I'm going to do is mix equal parts bold titanium white with bone white. So I've got those two colours mixed up, and I've also added a little touch of water as well, just to thin it all down. And it's going to be a case of, as I say, going over basically anything that is a fabric. Okay, so continuing to just lay in the base colours, I'll come back and obviously start weathering all this at the end. But the next colour I'm going to use is some deck tan, and I'm going to use this for the boots and the gloves. It's onto the pouches around the belt, and again I want to do a slightly different colour for that. So I've mixed equal parts sandry dust with some deck tan to give myself a nice sort of lightish beige colour. And with those pouches painted in, that's all the base colours across all the clothing now done. So what I'm going to do now is work across the rest of the model and start filling in some of the details. And the first thing I want to work on is the backpack. So take in some neutral grey. I'm just going to add this to all the areas that need it. So there's going to be a lot of referring to reference material. And just going to apply on all these base colours as I need to. Okay, is on to black next. So again, any details that need black, obviously the most important thing is the eye lenses. Next up is gunmetal silver. Last of the base colours now is red, and I'm using Mephiston red from Citadel. Okay, so with all the base colours now applied, we've got ourselves quite a clean looking Snowtrooper, so it's time we do the weathering and actually get this guy to look a little bit more realistic. So the first thing I'm going to do is apply a wash all over the lighter coloured fabrics. So what I've done here is I've taken Seraphim Sepia and I have really sort of watered that down, if you like, with Lahmian Medium, which is essentially just a colourless paint. So I've probably done about 1/4 of the sepia to 3/4 of the Lahmian. So as you can see, it's not particularly strong, which is what I wanted. I just want to sort of tint it here and there. And you know, as you put it on, it'll sort of naturally go on a bit heavier in some places other than others, which will be absolutely fine. Hopefully it will sit down in some of the recesses and the creases and the folds, and it should hopefully look quite natural once it's all dried. Okay, so that wash is now all dried, and as you can see, it's definitely dirtied it all down, made it a little bit more grubby. Now, where it's going to be a little bit heavy in places, which is just what happens with washes really, what I'm going to do now is dry brush it back up. So doing the exact same mix that I did with the cloth, so that was an equal part of titanium white and bone white. So now I'm just essentially just going to do a dry brush over this, and so what that's going to do, so it's just essentially, as I say, tidy up most of it. Any sort of areas where it's gone on a bit too hard, a bit too sort of thick in places, this will just start to tidy that up. But at the same time, it'll still retain most of the areas that are shaded. And after that dry brushing, this is the result. So I ended up using that same colour mix on basically every part of the fabric, so on the boots, the skirt, trousers, and also the pouches and the arms as well. So the next thing I'm going to do is now start to weather down the armour. So what I'm going to do is use some black panel liner. I'm going to fill in like some of these big cracks and also just sort of go along some of the recesses just to bring out the detail. So for that I'm going to use some AKA panel liner, which is essentially a oil black wash. So all you need to do is to grab a little bit of this and then just gently put it into the recesses, and it should sort of act a little bit like magic and kind of find its own way around. Now if you make any overspill, you can just wipe that off with a cotton bud or a sponge. Now I've got my pastels out for the next part, so these are some nice soft pastels, and I've selected a few different colours, some browns and some greys, and it's just a case of getting your brushes and working some of that pastel into the bristles, and then yeah, just basically working it into wherever you want to darken the recesses. Just add a little bit of bandle damage and then just blow away any excess. So I'm going to work around the model doing this, and then that will just again bring out the details a little bit and add just a little bit of weathering and some wear and tear. Okay, and that is the weathering on the armour all finished. Now once I put the model all together, I might come back in and add a little bit of texture here and there, but on the whole I think I'm pretty happy with how it's looking. So final little job to do now, and the figure at least will be finished, and that is simply to do a little bit of weathering on the blaster. So all you do is simply take a little bit of silver of your choice, and just add a little bit of chipping here and there on the edges, just to give it a slight bit of interest. Now moving on to the base, the first thing I'm going to do is take some lead belcher silver and I want to paint in this sort of metal grill here in the middle. That is then followed by an all-over black wash. I'm using Nuln Oil by Citadel. Next up, I'm going to paint the Imperial cog symbol, and for that I'm going to use some of this Mephiston red. Now, taking some nice warm grey from Pro Acryl, I'm just painting over each of these sort of honeycomb pieces, and I'm leaving the recesses black. Next up, I'm going to take some Wild Rider red, and using a stippling brush, but of course you could just use any sort of brush really, I'm just going to stipple some of this slightly across that, just to sort of give it a bit more interest. And then finally, I'm going to take some neutral grey and do the exact same thing, and this time on each of these tiles. So again, just sort of do a little bit of speckling over each one. Now, obviously, given how many tiles there is, this is going to take a little while. Okay, now admittedly I might got a bit carried away with that stippling, but I think it looks kind of cool. So that is the base finished. So with that piece done, I can now put the model together, and I'm going to come back and show you the final result. Okay then folks, that is a wrap on the Snowtrooper. So that was quite a simple little model to make, really and truly. It wasn't anything too difficult. There's no skin tones, there's no faces, there's no eyes to paint, you know, all the difficult things that you normally come across. Guys in armour, nice and simple, nice beginner, easy models to make. So I ended up gluing him permanently into the base. The pegs in the feet were just kind of too short really, and so he was a bit too wobbly, so I prefer not to do that if I can help it, because obviously I like the option just in case I ever have to sort of transport these things to take them apart, but yeah, it is what it is. So what I'll do now is I'll actually bring in a previous model from the same guy's Stormtrooper model. So let's bring him along. Here he is. Move you over to the side. Just to give you a bit of a size comparison, really. Now, I think from a height point of view, they work pretty well. I think the Stormtrooper, and I've said this in the past, he's a little bit oversized. In fact, you can really see that now on the size of the guns, considering these are supposed to be the same gun. That is definitely a little bit bigger. Interestingly as well, they have the same style of base, but again, the Stormtrooper base is actually quite a bit higher. You can see there, It tucks in sort of underneath. So yeah, they're not actually strictly level there, which isn't the end of the world, but just thought I'd mention it. So yeah, they're looking pretty good together as a pair. It's funny because I never realised how grubby the Snowtroopers were until I was sort of looking up the reference materials. You would think that them fighting in the snow all the time would keep them nice and clean, but apparently not. They're pretty much as grubby as a sand trooper. So, grubbiness aside, I think that is going to take us to the end of the video, so thank you so much for watching. And if you'd like to see further content of this nature, then please consider subscribing. Until next time, take care everyone.